Hello and welcome. This is Cass County Community Living Abuse and Neglect Training. The purpose of this training is for you to understand the definitions of abuse and neglect, know how to report allegations of abuse and neglect, understand the appeals process, and understand what it means if allegations are substantiated. The purpose of this training is to ensure that all CCCL staff are properly trained to identify signs of abuse and neglect, to protect you as the employee, to protect the individual, and to protect the agency and our ability to provide the services to these individuals. The certification principles and standards are as follows. All agency staff will be trained in preventing, detecting, and reporting any suspected abuse or neglect. Remember, abuse and neglect is strictly prohibited by agency policy. Remember, there is a fine line between order and control. Guardian or no guardian, all of our individuals have rights. You must know their ISP, you must know the person, and you must know what is and is not appropriate for each individual. There are basically 5 types of abuse that we will discuss during this presentation: physical abuse, sexual abuse, misuse of funds or property, verbal abuse, and neglect. Abuse is defined as the willful infliction by a caregiver of physical pain or injury, or the willful deprivation of services necessary to protect the physical safety of an individual. Physical abuse may include an employee purposefully beating, striking, wounding, or otherwise injuring an individual, touching in any manner whatsoever, an employee mistreating or maltreating an individual in a brutal or inhumane manner. An employee handling an individual with more force than is reasonably necessary for an individual's proper control, treatment, or management. Sexual abuse is defined by kissing, touching of genitals, buttocks, or breasts, except where noted in the ISP for bathing purposes, causing the individual to touch the employee for sexual purposes or in a sexual manner, promoting sexual activity, or observing for a sexual purpose. Any activity or performance for a sexual purpose, such as plays, motion pictures, photography, dance, or other visual or written representations of a sexual nature. Failing to intervene or attempting to stop non-consensual sexual acts, or encouraging inappropriate sexual activity between individuals. Misuse of property and funds is defined by the misappropriation or transfer for any purpose the individual's funds or property by an employee with or without consent, or the purchase of a property or service from the individual which the purchase price is substantially below market value. All employees must have finance training before handling the individual's money. Any purchase of $100 or more must be approved by the QMP and service coordinator prior to the purchase. Selling or buying items from an individual that is served is strictly prohibited. Borrowing or loaning money between individuals and staff is strictly prohibited by agency policy and may be cause for immediate termination. Not properly accounting for the individual's money spent by providing initial receipts is also considered a misuse of funds and can result in termination as well. Misuse of property and funds also includes the consumption of individuals' food in the ISL setting without contribution. Employees must contribute to the household meals in the ISL setting. Staff meals are only provided by the company in the group homes. Verbal abuse may be defined as an employee making a threat of physical violence to an individual when such threats are made directly to an individual or about an individual in the presence of another individual of the agency. Other inappropriate behaviors by staff might include the staff curses when burned at the stove while cooking, even if it's not directed at the individual, saying to an individual, "You're just being lazy," or talking to one individual about another individual in a negative manner. Other forms of verbal abuse might include spats or arguments with your friends or family on the phone or in person while you are working in the individual's home, where the individual can not only hear it, but is forced to listen. The use of profanity, even if you think the individual can't understand it. The use of profanity is unacceptable in the individual's homes and will not be tolerated. More verbal abuse may include loud talking or yelling by the staff, whether it is to the individual or not, gestures and/or mimicking an individual's actions or behaviors, calling names such as idiot, dummy, retard, etc. Verbal abuse will not be tolerated. Neglect may be defined as the failure of an employee to provide reasonable and necessary services to maintain the physical and mental health of any individual, especially when that failure represents either imminent danger to health and safety or a substantial probability that death or physical injury may result for the individual. Some examples of neglect might include injury due to a car accident where you did not encourage the individual to utilize the seat belt, not monitoring or providing a diabetic diet to a diabetic as ordered, or not reporting abuse and neglect when observed. Sending someone to work or to Casco without reporting their complaints of chest pain to the CCCL nurse or supervisor on call, not following the level of supervision as defined in the individual's ISP plan. These also are examples of neglect. Possible signs of physical abuse may include cuts, lacerations, punctures, and wounds. It may be bruises, welts, or discolorations such as grip marks, or burns, possibly by cigarette, water, or other hot items. When providing personal care to the individuals, be aware of these potential signs, but be discreet in your observations as to not make the individual feel uncomfortable. Should you find any evidence of physical abuse, report it immediately. As a direct support professional, you are a mandatory reporter. If you have a reasonable belief that an individual has been subjected to physical, sexual, or verbal abuse, or has been exploited by the misuse of funds or neglected, you must report it immediately. Allegations of abuse and neglect are always taken very seriously and will be investigated. This agency will follow the letter of the law and state code of regulation in dealing with abuse and neglect. This will include any legal action or criminal prosecution when warranted. The agency policy for reporting suspected abuse or neglect: call and report to the agency manager immediately, complete an event report and submit it to the agency queue or director. The agency will report the incident to the Kansas City Regional Office as soon as reasonably possible, normally within 24 hours. The investigation process. When abuse or neglect is reported, management will report it to the Kansas City Regional Office and possibly local law enforcement when warranted. The inquiry coordinators at the regional office will determine the appropriate action that is to be taken. Appropriate actions may include a full investigation completed by the state investigators. All employees shall cooperate fully with any and all authorized investigators who are working on the allegations of abuse and neglect that have been reported. If the complaint of abuse and neglect are substantiated, the perpetrator shall not be employed by any agency providing DMH services. If substantiated and the perpetrator is a CCCL Inc. employee, termination will be immediate. Once the allegations of abuse and neglect are substantiated, the perpetrator's name shall be placed on the Department Disqualification Registry, the Family Safety Care Registry, pursuant to state regulations. This will disqualify this employee from ever working in the care industry again. If there is alleged abuse or neglect involving a CCCL Inc. team member, they may be placed on immediate suspension pending an investigation. This suspension may be non-paid if the allegations are substantiated. As mandatory reporters, any CCCL team member discovered not reporting instances of abuse or neglect will be subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination of employment. Please be aware there are many warning signs, such as sudden changes in behavior, depression or withdrawal, sexually inappropriate behaviors, urinating or defecating in their clothes or other inappropriate locations, unusual behaviors such as sucking, biting, or rocking. Bottom line, be observant. Determine and understand the changes in behavior. There are many reasons that may cause changes. It is your job to protect the individual and determine why. The best way to prevent abuse and neglect is to make sure that everyone is involved in their community, has control to make their own decisions, can do as much of their own as possible, understands their own rights. People who are involved and have control of their lives are far less likely to be victims. There are some common reasons for abuse and neglect by caregivers, such as alcohol or drug abuse by the caregiver, lack of proper training, being overworked, a stressful or negative work environment, or a lack of communication. Our agency works to prevent these potential causes. We are always working to improve our training and communication to ensure you have the proper knowledge and the tools to be successful. We try to always provide a positive, open, and low-stress work environment. Take a moment for a personal inventory. Are you deprived of proper rest? Are you taking care of yourself and not neglecting your own health needs? Have you been using drugs or alcohol to deal with stress? Have your feelings towards the person you care for become increasingly negative? Is the person or people you are caring for physically or verbally abusive to you? Are you overwhelmed because you are taking care of more than one person at a time? If you answered yes, or ever do answer yes in the future, you need to find the support you need to get help. The work you are doing in caring for these individuals is very important. Providing care to individuals with special needs requires much patience, time, and love. All too often, we as caregivers tend to neglect our own needs, and this will directly impact our ability to care for others. It is critical to maintain life balance and make sure you take care of you too. Please return to the training notification you received and click on the link to complete the Abuse and Neglect quiz. Have a great day, and again, thanks for all you do.